The subject tonight is not the management of pain or the negotiation of discomfort. The subject is the basis on which you live, decide, and interpret when the body shouts. Now just try to follow this. If we begin with the body as authority, the conversation is already over. It has announced its verdict, and we are only appealing the sentence. Oh, no, no, no. We do not begin there. We begin where being begins. We begin with what is true before a sensation rises and after it fades. God is, and that's enough to know. God is, that's all. Healing, as we use the word among disciples, is not primarily a change in matter. It is a change of standpoint, an awakening to what you are. Please remember this point. As long as you stand as a frightened body seeking correction, every rattle of the senses will be a command. But the moment you stand as spirit, before any evidence, without bargaining, sense noise is reduced to a report without jurisdiction. Actually, there is no relationship between the truth of identity and the testimony of sensation. They are entirely separate and distinct. The one is being. The other is commentary, sometimes loud, always secondary. You say, but what of pain? What of fatigue that folds you in the afternoon? What of panic that arrives uninvited? Or strange little signals that make you scan and search and fear? I know. We all know. The question for the disciple is not, how do I silence this immediately? But how do I relate to this without empowering it? Please remember, the symptom is loud, but it is not authority. It can tell you it hurts. It cannot tell you who you are. It can report agitation. It cannot define reality. Judge not according to appearance, but judge righteous judgment. That is, refuse to let noise become law. Now then, please remember, write it on your heart. Please remember, you are not in a body trying to get free. Spirit is, and spirit is free. Say it softly within yourself until it says itself. I am not a captive pleading with a warden. I am the life of God expressing, and freedom is the nature of that life. God is the only presence. Therefore, God is the only law. Therefore, God is the only identity. God is, and that's enough to know. Nothing in a nerve or a pulse can add to that, and nothing can take from it. We are not speaking tonight to the argument of the world that takes sensation as evidence and then constructs a theology to match it. We are speaking to disciples willing to practice a different basis of evidence, willing to let the invisible be the authority, willing to be still long enough to hear reality above the clamor. The world says, my feeling is my fact. The disciple says, my being is my fact. The world consults the flesh to determine truth. The disciple consults truth to interpret the flesh. So when the body shouts, you do not shout back. You do not submit. You quietly withdraw its credentials. You rest not in a technique, not in a defiance, but in recognition. Please remember, you are not in a body trying to get free. Spirit is, and spirit is free. From that beginning, appearance is reseated as appearance, not as judge, not as master. And in that beginning, peace begins. My kingdom is not of this world. My peace. My peace. Now just try to follow this. There is what you are, and there is what appears. There is identity, and there is report. Please remember this point, because it is the whole pivot of our practice. Actually, there is no relationship of cause between spirit and bodily testimony. They are entirely separate and distinct realms. Spirit is being. Sense is commentary. Spirit is the I am. Sensation is the weather of the moment. Oh, no, no, no. Never permit the commentary to be enthroned as cause. Never allow the weather to be sworn in as law. You say, but I feel it, and it shouts. Yes, the microphone may crackle, but the music is not in the wire. You are not a body containing a little spirit like a candle trapped in a jar. Please remember, I am not a body with a spark inside. I am spirit, and the body is at most an instrument of sense reporting. Instruments register, they do not legislate. Instruments can be tuned or untuned, quiet or noisy, but the life, the identity, the reality is prior to the instrument and independent of its momentary sound. Fear. Where does it begin? It begins precisely at the moment of consent. A sensation arises, neutral as fog, and immediately the mind attaches identity to it. This is happening to me. And a breath later, this is me. In that instant, the report is promoted to verdict, and the verdict to a sentence. Oh, but see the illusion there. Nothing has actually changed in the fact of being. Only an acceptance has occurred, a false ownership. Refuse that ownership, and you will watch fear starve for lack of a self to feed upon. Now then, we must be categorical. You will live by sense testimony or by spiritual recognition. You cannot take both as final authority at the same moment. One must be the master and the other the servant. If you make the senses your arbiter, spiritual truth will be reduced to a hope for better weather. If you stand in spiritual recognition, God is, and that's enough to know. The senses are demoted to their rightful office. Messengers without mandate, reporters without a gavel. Please remember, when the mind races, slow it with this. Spirit is free. Spirit is free. Let that be the first stabilization, not to change an appearance, not to bargain, but to seat yourself again where identity lives before any condition announces itself. From that seat, the symptom is not a decree. It is only a note, a passing signal saying, there is activity here. Very well, let the note be noted. But who you are is not in question. Ye shall know the truth, not feel a certain way, not see a certain number on a dial. Know the truth, and that knowing is the freedom. Can we really doubt that if life is infinite, a pulse cannot add to it? And if God is the only presence, a sensation cannot subtract from it? Please remember, what you are precedes what appears. Stand there, and the body's testimony retreats to its proper place. Useful as a report, perhaps, never again a verdict pronounced upon your being. My peace, my peace. God is, and that's enough to know. Now then, just try to follow this, because here we pass from concept to practice. Non-consent is not the hard face of denial, not clenched teeth, not a spiritual fist shaken at a sensation. Oh, no, no, no. Non-consent is the quiet refusal to grant authority to appearance. It is the gentle but firm act of withdrawing the credential you yourself had unknowingly handed to the report. You do not push a wave back into the ocean. You recognize it as ocean moving, and you stand unperturbed in the knowledge of the sea. So with symptoms, you do not push, you do not plead, you do not prosecute. You simply do not enthrone them. There are, as I see it, 3 inner positions you may take. First, fearing the symptom. That is, to bow to its alleged jurisdiction, to treat it as a magistrate whose word binds you. immediately the mind begins its theater. What if? How far? How long? Oh, and then the calendar and the clock are dragged in as witnesses. Please remember, fear is consent. Second, fighting the symptom. That is, to make it an opponent worthy of your arena, to wrestle, to argue, to analyze, to monitor and measure and bargain. That too is consent, because whatever you fight, you keep before your consciousness as something. Third, witnessing the symptom. This alone keeps you free. To witness is to acknowledge a report without adopting an identity from it. It is to say inwardly, I am not what appears. I am not a body pleading. I am spirit knowing. It is stillness with awareness, awareness without ownership. Not panic, not bargaining, not analyzing, not rehearsing worst-case outcomes. Oh, no, no, no. We do not step into the trance of evidence by pacing the floor with the evidence in our hands. We let the report be a report, and refuse it the gavel. The mechanics are simple if you will allow them to be simple. What you fear, you feed. Your attention is its bread. What you resist obsessively, you pin to the bulletin board of your mind, and you will see it every hour because you have hung it there. What you quietly disallow loses its claim, because it cannot live without your agreement. Please remember this point. Authority in your life is wherever you place it. So we practice a sentence, not a charm, not a spell, but a centering truth. This is not my life. This is not my identity. This is not the truth of being. And let it be followed, if you feel to, by the positive recognition. God is my life. Spirit is my identity. Truth is the only being. Repeat it not in haste, but as one who has sat down in his own house. Each time the mind would look again, would check again, would rummage again in the closet of fears. Oh no. Return to witness. Let the sensation be as weather passing the window. You are not the sky's apprentice running after clouds with a rope. You are the awareness in which clouds appear and pass. Now please remember, this is not indifference, and it is not neglect. It is love of truth. It is the mercy that says to yourself, I will not sacrifice my peace on the altar of a report. In that stance, peace comes not as a prize, but as your native air. God is, and that's enough to know. From there, let the body go about its simple business under a higher government. My peace. My peace. Now then, just try to follow this, because here is the crux of it. If you keep approaching God as a mechanic of matter, as a great hand reaching down to twist a bolt or patch a leak, you have already accepted the premise that matter is the scene of reality, and that God must come there to do something. Oh, no, no, no. Never believe that spirit is battling symptoms. That grants symptoms a status, a place, a power, and turns the infinite into a rival on the field. Please remember this point. God is not a power over anything. God is being, the all-presence in which no second presence can rise to challenge. We are not to say, God, fix my body, as if God were outside both you and truth, waiting for a request order. That is petition. That is time. That is bargaining with a calendar in one hand and a thermometer in the other. We move, as disciples, from petition to recognition. God is the health of my countenance. Not give me health. God is these. God is the strength of my life. Not send me strength. God is these. God is is the realization that removes the battlefield, not a tactic to win on it. God is, and that's enough to know. God is, that's all. Now watch what happens in your own heart when you exchange asking for acknowledging. The breath slows, the eyes soften. Why? Because you have stepped out of time, out of waiting for a sign to certify being, out of the anxious arithmetic of progress. Recognition places you in the now that is God. Not later, not after improvement, now. And in the now of God, peace is native. My peace, my peace. When the mind would say, "But when will I see it? How soon will it show?" Answer it with your mantra. God is, God is, God is. Let the words not be a chant for magic, but a resting in presence. Each repetition is a returning, a homecoming. God is. Please remember, never dishonor the infinite by calling it to arms against a finite suggestion. That is, to appoint the suggestion as a second power, and then ask the first to defeat it. Spirit needs no contest. I am that I am. That is the whole gospel of being. In that I am, the so-called problem is not conquered. It is dissolved as unreality in the face of what is. And because this is not a fight, it is calm. Because it is not a request waiting for evidence, it is immediate. Because it is not an emergency but reality, it is steady. So when thought scatters, do not chase it down a corridor of reasons. Stand still in the great simplicity. God is my life. God is my light. God is my peace. And if the senses protest, very well, let a report be a report. Do not decorate it with authority. Return again. God is. God is. God is. In that recognition, you have not changed reality. You have stopped asking it to prove itself. And the peace that comes is not the prize of a victory. It is the atmosphere of being itself, in which appearances are seen for what they are, and you are known for what you are. God is, and that's enough to know. Thank you. Thank you. Now then, just try to follow this, because here is where we pass from a flash of recognition to a way of living. The first evidence of spiritual life is not a symptom score. It is the peace that passeth understanding. Please remember this point. When you make a chart of the body the judge of your progress, you condemn yourself to a calendar and a thermometer as your prophets. Oh, no, no, no. Peace is the sign. Not a human quiet that comes after improvement, but the divine hush that precedes and defines it. My peace I give unto you, not as the world giveth. That is the signal light on the road we travel. When that peace dawns, even faintly, the inner government has changed. The body is no longer master. It becomes a messenger at the door, ringing perhaps, sometimes insistently, but you are not compelled to run every time the bell sounds. Feel the difference. Before peace, a sensation is a command, and you become an attendant, rushing, measuring, consulting the past and dreading the future. In peace, a sensation is a notice only. It is heard but not obeyed. You remain seated in your rightful place. The atmosphere within changes from scrutiny to sanctuary. Thought slows, not through effort, but because it has found its home. My kingdom is not of this world. My peace. My peace. In that climate, fear loses its air supply because it cannot breathe where being is recognized. You have not conquered anything. You have simply refused to enthrone what never had a right to rule. Now then, the practical sequence. Please remember it, because it is simple and it is enough. When a report arises, stop. Not 5 minutes from now. Now. Be still. Not as a technique to fix anything, but as the act of stepping back into what is. Recognize presence, quietly, without strain. God is. Rest there. Let the mind drop its surveillance. Take down the ladders, the binoculars, the measuring tapes. Refuse the patrol. Each time it tries to go out clicking locks and checking windows, you gently say, "No. God is my safety. God is my life. God is." And you sit down again in your own house. Do this for a minute, or 3, or 10. Time is not the point. The point is that you have changed governments, and then carry it with you. Please remember, if peace is real, it is portable. It must go into the kitchen while the pan hisses, into the workplace while schedules clamor, into the night hours when the mind would rehearse and the senses would accuse, into the flare days when the weather within seems wild. Make no performance of it. Simply walk in it. A few minutes of genuine stillness can saturate hours afterward, and you will find yourself returning to it in a breath, in a glance inward, in a whispered, "God is," as naturally as one returns to one's own name. Do not lock peace in a room and visit it like a chapel. Let it be the air of your house. Downstream, now follow this carefully. Downstream of peace, strain lessons. Downstream of peace, functions that have been living on your fear are released from that diet. Sometimes quickly, sometimes quietly, sometimes so gradually you notice after the fact. We do not set clocks for grace. We do not bargain with when. We stand where being is and let effects take their cue from that state. The body follows the consciousness it is living in. Please remember, peace first, then function. Not because peace earns function, not because spirit manipulates matter, but because in the realized presence of God, the jangling of thought is stilled. And under that hush, life resumes its simple, orderly business by a higher government than nerves and dates. So our work remains one work. Find peace in God. Rest there. Abide there. God is, and that's enough to know. My peace. My peace. Now then, just try to follow this, because here is where many of us lose our peace after we have found it. You cannot serve 2 masters. You cannot call spirit your authority, and then, the next minute, a sensation barks. Lay down your peace and take orders from the bark. Oh, no, no, no. A house divided against itself cannot stand. Not because God withdraws, but because you have split your allegiance and made instability your atmosphere. Please remember this point. The symptom may be loud, but it becomes your master only by your consent. And if you keep handing it the gavel, and then snatching it back for God, and then handing it over again, you create a seesaw of fear and brief relief. Fear and brief relief. That is the cost of switching masters. What does divided reliance look like in actual experience? A report rises, the pulse jumps, the mind runs its rehearsals, and then, almost as an afterthought, you say a quick, "God is," the way one pats a pocket to be sure the keys are there. For a breath, you feel steadied. Then you return at once to checking, scanning, comparing, measuring, looking up what it could mean, pacing the hall of your own thoughts and peeking through the blinds of tomorrow. That is not reliance. That is panic with a spiritual word taped on its forehead. It is using prayer as a panic tool and then immediately submitting again to the tribunal of sense. Please remember, whatever you make the final court of appeal will rule your day. Now let me correct what often gets misunderstood. Undivided reliance is not stubbornness, and it is not defiance of a body. It is integrity. It is allowing one basis of reality, spirit as truth, to govern your interpretation without interruption. It is not a refusal to notice what appears. It is a refusal to let what appears define what is. Integrity here means that your inside and your stated faith agree. That you do not say, God is, and then act as if appearances were law. It is not a bar of iron in the will. It is a single eye in the heart. Grant yourself compassion. In an emergency, you may reach for any help at hand. When the storm howls, you grab the nearest rail. Be merciful with yourself in that. But do not make the storm your permanent counselor. Do not let fear become your daily advisor. When the gust passes, return to your government. Enter into thy closet. Reset the basis. Re-enthrone peace, not as a prize you hope to earn, but as presence already here. Tie this back now to the method we have learned. The divided house begins at the moment you give symptoms voting power over identity. Withdraw the vote. Non-consent is precisely this. You do not fight the report, and you do not crown it. You witness it without granting it jurisdiction. You say within, I am not what appears. I am spirit, and spirit is free. Then you abide. You will find that stability returns to the mind that has chosen a single master. Choose, and choose once, and choose again each time thought wanders. God is, and that's enough to know. God is. God is. My peace. My peace. Now then, just try to follow this, because here we touch the lever most of us handle all day without noticing it. Language is consent. Please remember this point. When you say, my illness, my fatigue, my anxiety, you have handed the suggestion your name, your keys, your address. Oh, no, no, no. You have not only described a sensation, you have adopted it, installed it, and given it family rights. What you call mine, you will defend and fear, because ownership carries duty, and duty breeds vigilance, and vigilance is the very climate of unrest. The world speaks like this because the world takes sense testimony as selfhood. My back, my flare, my condition. We are not speaking to the world tonight. We are speaking to disciples who have chosen another basis. Please remember, identity is spirit, and spirit is free. If spirit is free, where can bondage occur? If God is life, where can life be threatened? If God is omnipresent, where could a second presence stand to oppose it? There is no such place. Actually, there is no relationship between the truth of being and the clamor of appearance. They are entirely separate and distinct. Therefore, the disciple adopts a different vocabulary, not as magic, not as superstition, but as fidelity to the fact. We say, there is a sense report, a suggestion has presented, an appearance is passing, a claim is knocking at the door. Notice the difference. The first set of phrases crowned a sensation as owner and judge. The second set keeps it outside your identity, at the door, without the deed to your house. Language here is a steering wheel. Turn it toward ownership, and you drive into fear. Turn it toward witnessing, and you find the road of peace. Words are not power in themselves. They are admission slips. They reveal which court you are entering. Now then, here is a gentle daily discipline. Simple, quiet, and effective if you will be faithful. Catch the first sentence you say to yourself when a symptom speaks. The very first one. Do not let it run on unobserved. Freeze the frame and listen. If it begins with my, revise it at once into non-consent. Shift my pain is back to there is a suggestion of discomfort. Shift my panic is starting to a sense report of agitation is presenting. Do it not as a clever trick, but as truth-telling. You are not lying about a sensation. You are telling the truth about identity. You are refusing to forge a bond. Please remember, we are not fighting language, and we are not policing thoughts with anxiety. Oh no. We are practicing integrity. We are permitting only that speech which agrees with what we know. God is my life. Therefore, life is not in peril. God is my peace. Therefore, peace is not a variable. God is, and that's enough to know. Each corrected sentence is a small homecoming, a returning of the mind to its rightful owner. And you will find, watch this for yourself, that peace responds to honest naming. To call a report is to remove its badge. To call a suggestion is to strip it of mandate. In that clarity, the heart rests, not because something outside has been managed, but because you have withdrawn consent where you had unknowingly given it. What you name as mine, you will defend and fear. What you recognize as suggestion, you can release. Let that be the watchman at your lips. Let your words reveal your government. And when the mind would hurry to dramatize, to publish, to perform, no. Be simple. Be quiet. Witness and rename, and return to presence. My peace. My peace. God is. God is. God is. Now then, just try to follow this, because this is a necessary ethic for those who would live by spirit and not by applause, not even the applause of sympathy. Enter into thy closet. Please remember this point. The healing atmosphere is quiet. When you stop performing the problem, you make room for inner communion. The world has taught us to publish our pain to purchase companionship. Oh, no, no, no. That companionship binds you to a story you must keep retelling to keep the company. Every recounting rehearses the part. Every rehearsal makes the part feel like your identity. We are not speaking tonight to the world's method of getting along. We are speaking to disciples who would rather have God as their company than a chorus to echo their fear. Enter into thy closet, and when thou hast shut thy door, pray to thy Father which is in secret, and thy Father which seeth in secret shall reward thee openly. Not as a superstition, as a law of consciousness. When you dramatize a symptom, tell it, text it, relive it, gesture it. You audition for the role again and again. And the mind, obedient servant that it is, keeps the script handy. But when you keep the work inward, you starve the storyline. The theater goes dark. The stagehands go home. The mind loses its audience, and, with no applause to work for, it becomes still enough to hear presence. Please remember, secrecy is not hiding from God. Secrecy is hiding with God. Now humility. Be willing not to know. Be willing not to figure it out. Be willing to let uncharted territory be uncharted. Oh, how the mind worships its understanding, charts, causes, mechanisms, little maps of why this, why now. Be grateful if you have no understanding, for His understanding is infinite. Your relinquishment of analysis is not negligence, it is devotion. I can of mine own self do nothing. The moment you stop crowning your insight, you create a vacancy in which the infinite may be known as Emmanuel, God with us. Not God as explanation, but God as being. God is, and that's enough to know. Now then, a practice, simple and private. A few minutes, many times a day, and at any moment a report rises. Step aside inwardly and shut the door. Close the lips, quiet the eyes. Let the hands be still. Do not audit the body. Do not take inventory. Do not peek at the dials. Whisper within if you must whisper. Emmanuel, God with us. Rest there. Feel the subtle loosening as the mind lays down its clipboard and the heart takes up its altar. 1 minute is enough if it is entire. 3 minutes is overflowing if there is no audience in you. And when you return to activity, return in secrecy. Carry the hush with you. Make no announcement of it. Please remember, secrecy is non-consent, applied socially and internally. You no longer give the symptom a microphone. You no longer rent it a stage. You no longer collect tickets at the door of your own thoughts. You witness. You refuse ownership, and you return to presence. Quietly, sweetly, consistently. And the Father which seeth in secret, oh yes, rewards openly, not with a performance, but with peace. My peace. My peace. God is. God is. God is. Thank you. Thank you. Now then, just try to follow this, because here's the way you can move at once when the bell rings at the door of sense. Your whole task may be put into 3 movements. Recognize, refuse consent, return. That is all. Do not build a case. Do not assemble a committee. Do not take a vote on tomorrow. Please remember this point. In the moment of the report, speed is not the hurrying of thought. Speed is the simplicity of fidelity. First, recognition. A sensation arises. Very well. Name it correctly. This is sense testimony. Not my condition. Not it's starting again. Not this always means. Oh, no, no, no. We are not merging. We are witnessing. Let the mind say, quietly and without drama, a report is presenting. That sentence ends the rush to adopt. You have drawn the boundary that identity is spirit and spirit is free. You have allowed the instrument to register without permitting the instrument to legislate. Second, non-consent. Without frown or argument, because argument is consent in a different costume, say within, I do not grant you authority over identity, destiny, or peace. Period. Not because you hope it will go, because it never had the jurisdiction. Do not add reasons. Reasons are bargaining chips. You do not need them. The authority you withdraw is the authority you had unknowingly given. Please remember, fear is consent. Resistance is consent. Witnessing without ownership is freedom. Third, return. Turn at once, not after checking, not after measuring, to presence. God is. If words help, let it be that simple. Spirit is here. I am in God. God is my life. Rest, even for 1 honest minute, until the mind loosens its clipboard and the heart opens its altar. Feel the hush. my peace, my peace. This is not a technique to change weather. It is the home to which weather is irrelevant. Abide there, softly, secretly. Enter into thy closet, on a bus, at a desk, standing at a sink, and shut the door of inner commentary. Now the hurdles. What if it persists? Duration is not authority. 10 minutes of weather does not become law by the clock. Recognize, refuse, return, again. What if it flares? Volume is not jurisdiction. Loud is not law. Recognize, refuse, return, again. What if you feel you failed? That feeling is just another suggestion. Treat it the same way. Recognize, refuse, return. Please remember, persistence only proves that a claim can knock. It never proves it owns the house. Tie this back. Identity is prior to condition, so recognition protects identity. Peace precedes function, so the return is your real work. The body follows the consciousness it lives in. Secrecy sustains practice, so do this quietly, without performing your pain or your prayer. A breath is enough when the breath is entire. You need no audience, no announcement, no stopwatch. And so, each time the bell rings, the same answer. Recognize, sense testimony only, non-consent, no authority granted. Return. God is. God is. God is. Let the world count its reports. You keep your peace. My peace. My peace. Thank you. Thank you. Now then, just try to follow this, because this is the closing assurance upon which all the rest stands. You are not trying to get free. Oh, no, no, no. Freedom is not a project. Freedom is not a negotiation with nerves and calendars. Freedom is not an achievement earned from the body. Spirit is free. Spirit is free. Spirit is free. Please remember this point. If identity is spirit and spirit is free, then you are not on your way to something. You are awakening to what is. The practice we have learned does not create liberty, it reveals it. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. Not later, not after, but here. Now the mind will say, but I can still feel it. I can still hear it. I can still see a report. Very well. Weather may pass. The sky is untouched. Appearances may tap the window. The house remains. Sensations may speak, but they cannot address being. They cannot alter what you are. They cannot enter the sanctum where I am knows I am. Actually, there is no relationship between spirit's freedom and the noise of suggestion. They are entirely separate and distinct. The suggestion belongs to time. Being is eternal. The suggestion comes and goes. Identity does not come or go. Please remember, a feeling is not a law. A sound is not a statute. A report is not a verdict. My kingdom is not of this world. In that kingdom, fear has no office to occupy. So a choice is set before you. And it is a beautiful, simple, empowering choice. Today you may live as a body hoping for spirit. Oh, chasing, checking, bargaining. Or you may live as spirit, witnessing a body, letting it be a servant, a messenger, a useful garment, but never a master. One basis or the other, one court of appeal or the other. Choose you this day whom you will serve. And if 10 times in a day the mind drifts back to the old master, choose again. Integrity is not a single dramatic vow. It is the quiet returning, the faithful choosing. God is, and I rest there. God is, and I choose there. Again and again. I do not send you out with a promise about symptoms. I send you out with a promise about stance. My peace. My peace. Not as the world giveth. Not as a truce you win by defeating appearances, but as presence you carry because you are living from it. Take it into the shop, into the street, into the bed at midnight, into the morning light. When the bell rings, you already know the answer. Recognize. Refuse consent. Return. And deeper than even those movements is the fact beneath them. Spirit is free, and you are that. Nothing can rise against the I am and find footing. Let the last word be the first word, and let it be enough. God is my life. God is my peace. God is my health, my supply, my light. Not as gifts sent, but as being present. God is, and that's enough to know. Rest there now. Walk there now. Abide there now. My peace. My peace. Thank you. Thank you.